Perfect. Give it a couple of minutes. There we go. Right, Dan, I think should we just start now, I think, while people are joining. But thank you so much to everybody that's joining at the moment for today's talk through. I'm here with Dan Newman, who is the chair of the School SIG, which was set up about 18 months ago now. And over the last few months to a year, the special interest group have been putting together the first resource focusing on sleep and particularly directed at sort of a year 6 age group for schools in terms of the importance of the sleep pillar for school age children. So as I say, the resource has been created. We're absolutely delighted that they've come up with this brilliant resource. It's now available anyway. It's connected to the special interest group page of our website. And today Dan is going to talk through it just to explain what the resource is and how best to be able to get maximum benefit from the resource when approaching schools to use it in classes. We're recording this today, so this will also be uploaded to the SIG page of the website. And obviously that means that if you're wanting to use it, which we encourage everybody to do specifically in the month of June, it means that you can go to there and watch back just to get a bit of guidance as to how to use it. So Dan, I'm going to pass over to you, and many thanks again for doing this today. One other thing, sorry, any questions Dan will be able to cover at the end. The Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, if you've got any questions while Dan's talking, pop questions in there. And if you've got any other little questions along the way, then you can certainly chat to me in the chat box, but we'll direct those questions to Dan at the end. But thank you very much, Dan.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Emma. Yeah, it's really good to be able to talk to you about some of the work that we've been doing. I'm just going to start my, if I just can share my screen here. Sorry, one technical issue at the moment. So there we go. So I'm hoping you can all see that. Is that?
Yeah, that's great, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll just start by introducing myself. Really, I'm Dan Newman. I've been leading the school's SIG for the last 18 months, as Emma was saying, and we've been working together to put together this resource into sleep. My background is in schools, so I've worked as a PE teacher and a head of PE for over 20 years, and now my role has changed, and I'm actually delivering lifestyle medicine and health coaching across 20 schools in Surrey. It's a trust called Xavier. So I've had a lot of experience in kind of doing talks to parents, doing talks to children, doing like INSET and CPD to staff members as well. And we've put together this program, which is really building momentum around lifestyle medicine and health coaching. And so I've got that background within the trust, but I've got my own company called Lifestyle First, and we're actually now writing curriculums, PSHE curriculums, which are lifestyle medicine focused, and we're also training health coaches to work in educational environments as a health coach, and teachers as well to be able to do more health coaching as part of their support for students and families in the school. So that gives you a little bit of background in terms of where my experience lies, which is obviously quite different to maybe lots of you who have the medical training and the background in that field. But I have done the core accreditation and the health coaching qualifications as well. So today's session, what I'm hoping for is to just sort of show you why we need more lifestyle medicine in schools, and that's why we want to get you guys into schools and supporting our students and our parents and our staff as as much as you can. And then kind of just about more on the mechanics and how we can make this happen. And we know that schools are not always as receptive as they might be, but there's some, maybe some tactics you can use to help with that. And then sort of obviously going through the resource, going through the slides, showing you maybe how you can present them, and giving you some ideas on having maximum impact when you do get into the school. So if we start by kind of why do we need this? Schools are struggling. Lots of them are finding that attendance is dropping. They're noticing that behaviour is becoming more challenging. Attainment levels is obviously where their focus is, but they're finding it harder to actually teach quality lessons. They do lots of work on teaching and learning and pedagogy, but the kids' readiness to learn is not as good as it was. And so now, despite all these efforts to improve the quality of the teaching, they're getting very, very frustrated because they put a lot of effort into that. And then the kids' focus, the kids' concentration levels and their behavior levels and their attendance levels are dropping. So it's obviously not having the effect that they would like it to. And generally, we're just seeing kids' confidence drop, and that can manifest in all kinds of different ways. And a lot of it can be defiant behavior and aggressive behavior and defensive behavior. So we need to do something to address this, and schools are kind of trying lots of different solutions, but I think the solutions they're looking at the moment, some of them have benefit, of course, but they're not largely getting to that root cause of the problem. And when we're looking at some of the behavioural issues, the interventions might be around some ELSA training and sort of that emotional support. But actually, the kid is going to bed at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They're drinking cans of Monster or energy drinks to keep them fueled up, or coffees, or and they're then coming in the next day not being able to regulate themselves. And the school doesn't really address that at the moment, or few schools will be, but they will try to think, well, let's give them a bit of emotional support. Let's talk to them about their behaviour and why they, made those decisions. So we're not getting at that root cause. So this is why it's so important to get, people like yourselves into schools, and delivering this lifestyle medicine message. And the rates of anxiety we know are on the increase, and depression as well is on the increase. And we're seeing lots of our children like actually avoiding school completely. And that is something that schools are really concerned about, because it costs a lot of money to them, and it's a big they need to put a lot of resource into then providing for these children that don't attend. So they're spending a lot of time firefighting, basically. So schools are becoming more and more open to new solutions, and especially root cause solutions, which are both preventative, but also have an interventional approach as well. So the resources we've created are hopefully going to enable you to get into the school. There's a letter which enables you to kind of send as an initial way of making contact. It might be that you have a relationship already with a school, in which case the letter might not be needed. And I would always suggest, if you have a relationship, then actually that face-to-face is going to be much more effective than having just sending a letter cold. But if you don't have that initially, then the letter can be a really good way to sort of to introduce what you want to do. There's also some evidence which shows the effects of sleep and lack of sleep on children. And then we've got the slides, which is a presentation which you can deliver to the students, or you can deliver it to the parents, or you can also deliver it to the staff. And I'm a big believer in actually getting the staff on board as much as you can, because they're the ones that are kind of role modeling a lot of their behaviors to the children. They're the ones that are seeing the children every day, and they can drip feed this information in. And I think that wraparound of having staff and parents sort of with the information and the awareness and kind of working together, gives the children a much better chance of making behavior change. We've also got a workbook for the students to use either when you're in, if you go in and work in the classroom with the students, it might be they can be filling that in as part of the session, or it could be something they could do post your visit, and the teachers could do as a class activity, or they might do it as a homework activity. And then we've got fabulous animation, which has been created as well, which kind of shows a case study of a student that's not getting enough sleep, and kind of what happens because of that, and kind of like the knock-on effects, and then what happens when they correct that sleep deficiency. So if I just try and do this now, technical thing, if I can get to the website, hopefully, are you seeing the website coming up there, or does that not appear on your...
Not seeing it at the moment, Dan. But...
I reckon I need to share. Let's stop sharing that and let's try and share that other window. How about that? Does that come up now?
Nope, not seeing. Oh, there we go. That's it. Yep, lovely.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. So so the resources are on the website. They're on, if you go to education and then you go to special interest groups, and if you scroll down to the schools one, then you can see we've got our resources here. So the letter is here, so it will download. So if I just open that, you can see it's set up and it's completely editable. So again, if you feel that you want to tweak it to make it fit with exactly the messages you want to give, that's absolutely brilliant. But it's a good starting point for you to use when you're thinking about getting in contact. We've then got the slides, which are here. So I will, oh, I've done it twice. It's clever. Okay. So I bet I've got a, can you see that? Is PowerPoint up, or do you need to know?
Yeah, no, I can't see it. I don't, the letter didn't actually come up
Oh,
either,
did
but
that
at
not
least
come
we
up
can
here?
see
See,
where the files are. But that's okay. But if the PowerPoint can come up, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, of course. So let's have a look. Is PowerPoint there?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. This is definitely testing my technical abilities here. Okay, so this is the PowerPoint which we've created, and I'm just going to kind of run through some ideas and then maybe talk at the end about some different tips and ideas on making the activities as engaging, and sort of ways in which you can, have the most impact when you're presenting in front of students or staff or parents. So I tend to start with this question, which is, what's the most important thing you have? And you can animate this to kind of come up one bit at a time so that they don't get the answer already there as being health. But I think if you frame your sessions with that in mind, that what is the most important thing you have, and you get the kids answer all kinds of things, and the parents answer, my children are the most important thing, my kids answer, my friends, my parents, they sometimes say my football, my PlayStation, and all these things, obviously. And just agree with them, they're all really important. But the most important thing I always argue is that if you don't have your health, then actually you're not going to be, able to parent as effectively. You're not going to be, able to support the people in your life as effectively. You're not going to be able to play football as effectively. So it's bringing it back down to actually having health as being that kind of most important fundamental that we all should be, prioritizing as number one, which enables everything else to happen really effectively off the back of that. And I then get them to think about, well, where are you on this continuum between optimal, thriving health and kind of poor and surviving? And, again, getting them to understand that you can't be up at optimal thriving every day, all day, that you're going to be kind of moving on that continuum continuously. But we want to be moving as much as possible towards that top end, and trying to get them to think about, do they even know what optimum and thriving could be like, and are we just kind of a lot of us settling for more into that kind of middle zone, and then getting them to even reflect on, well, what is health, and health, we often, think if I've got any pain, I've got any headaches, I'm actually in good health. But of course, you need those things to, feel in good health. But actually, health is more than that. And this idea of flourishing, and this idea that we need to actually connect with other people to be healthy. I often make the joke that, I've gone for my run and I've eaten my blueberries, that's it, health taken care of, and really helping them understand that it's so much more. We need to connect to people. We need to connect to, our food. We need to connect to nature, and actually giving them that bigger picture, connecting to something, even bigger than ourselves, something spiritual, how that is so important, in that overall, sort of health, perspective, and liking health to wholeness. So there's lots of different ways you can approach this, but I find that if you really give a clear, explanation of what being healthy is, and not this really reductionist view, and actually expand it out to, like, we need everyone else, the community, the planet, to be healthy in order to, have our individual health as well, then I think that really is something, the message in terms of schools and school communities, that's something that's really powerful, and like gets people working together to make this a priority. And then, I guess it's like providing them with some information. I include lots of different types of information at this point, but some of the things that the SIG thought would be important on here were just like the idea that we're talking about sleep in this presentation. So it's sort of thinking, well, a good night's sleep helps you maintain blood sugar level, helps you to control your weight, and that's something that is important for your overall well-being. We can look at, what's happening in terms of the depression, the anxiety, behavioural situations in our young children, and they can see these graphs and they can kind of see what's happening there. There's also some really good stuff that you can put in from Jonathan Haidt, and his book is The Anxious Generation, but there's a lot of graphs that he gives you access to, which shows the trends of mental health over the last 20 years or so, 25 years, and how since the introduction of smartphones, there's been a massive kind of uptick in, a lot of these mental health problems. Allergies and, our immune health, we know now, again, this is on a steep upward curve, and that I think the stat is about 35% of all adults, something like that are now allergic to something, and we reckon that's going to increase to about 50%, I think, by the year 2030. There's this, I think, is a really interesting concept, like asking the children, like, do you think your fitness level is good? Do you think you guys are running faster than your parents did when they were your age? And what about your parents? Were they running faster than their parents when they were their age? And actually, when we sort of show and share this stat that children now take 90 seconds longer to run a mile than they used to 30 years ago. That's an average, of course, and you'll still get the elite level performers who probably are quicker than has ever been, because the training and the, when they're really into it is really, really good. But the tail after that elite, the sort of the tail is so long, that the average now is really been brought down. And we're seeing that, one of my main motivations to move into doing what I'm doing was because I was seeing how, the lack of fitness, coordination, just general well-being across the kids that were coming up from primary school into secondary school, and they couldn't even run, sort of 200-300 meters without some of them bursting into tears and just being really confused about what changes were happening in their body. They just didn't really understand that it's completely natural to kind of breathe heavily and have your heart beating, sort of strongly. And so they panic in that kind of situation. So for me, I've seen a lot of this firsthand, and it's really concerning, and we need to obviously do something about it. But actually presenting these facts to the children, they want to be the best versions of themselves. Everyone wants to be the best versions of themselves, and I think given the right information and motivation, they will change their behaviours. So then it's kind of tying it back into all those stats that we saw there. Actually, sleep will have an impact on all of them, and that's going to be the focus of the talk. But sort of outlining what lifestyle medicine is, I think more crucial when you're talking to the parents and the staff. I think it's really nice to spend a little bit of time on this, talking about the fact that lifestyle medicine has all these different pillars and how each one of those pillars clearly makes an impact on another one. So we've just talked about sleep, how poor sleep will affect your blood sugar level, and how it can make you more grumpy and less empathetic, and therefore you're going to affect your healthy relationships. It might also make you less likely to go out for a run or do that bit of exercise. So you can tie it into all the different pillars. And I think, sort of showing them something like this as well, which is that there's lots of barriers maybe to doing the things that we know are good for us. But if we can get the environment effective and working for us, and we'll get good sleep and good movement and all the other things that we know that are in our, sort of in the lifestyle medicine principles, if we can do those things really well, then it's going to impact on our body systems, and our body systems are going to work in better balance, and they're going to work more effectively. And that will lead to less inflammation, and therefore less of these chronic health conditions which are starting to sort of mushroom in our adult populations, but also in our young people as well. And so it's really helping them understand that connection, that we've really got to get back to that root cause and work on that environment to get that working effectively, and then we can actually improve the symptoms that people are experiencing further down the line. And again, this is, I think, crucial with parents and with staff. And again, with the children, you can still talk about it, but I think, just being mindful of that you want to, really make it clear that this can help symptoms. It's not that it's going to cure them of ADHD or, because that kind of terminology clearly is not appropriate, but it's about really helping to manage the symptoms and improve the way they feel, and about how they can sort of have more energy and be able to focus better and be able to sort of be more effective at whatever it is they want to do in their life. And this again is something which, if one pillar falls, the rest are impacted. I think that this diagram kind of helps to explain that we need all of these pillars to be working together. And I often talk about the fact that we look for this this silver bullet, in terms of health, don't we? We're constantly like, what's the superfood I need to do that's going to sort everything out? Or what's the one type of exercise that's going to fix everything? And helping them to kind of realize that, there isn't a silver bullet. And actually, rather than focusing like all your attention on food, for example, which is a really big one that people look at, and it's actually, if we can look at each pillar and just think, if we can improve each pillar just a little bit, then the compound effect of all of those pillars improving just a little bit will be much, much greater than just focusing all your energy into one place. So I think that's a helpful thing as well, to give the children and the staff and the parents that same message, that we really need to take care of all of these pillars. And like I said at the beginning, if I just go for my run and eat my blueberries, well, that's going to be helpful. But if I'm not addressing my sleep, and I'm not addressing sort of stress in my life, then actually it's not going to be particularly effective. So the aim of the session to the children is that you're obviously introducing lifestyle medicine, which we've kind of done. And then it's helping to make them aware of the importance of sleep, and then give them some ideas on how to deliver how to actually have the best night's sleep that they can. So sleep is one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine, and there is the science behind sleep now that we're understanding more and more, and is something that has become, sleep has been not seen as important as maybe it is for many years. I think Margaret Thatcher maybe made it not such a she was dumbing down on sleep a lot, saying that she only needed 4 or 5 hours a night, and kind of made it feel like actually it's kind of wasting time. Let's just get on with life. Don't waste your time sleeping. And if we need to kind of prioritize something, then let's deprioritize sleep and do the other thing that we need to kind of get in, so that and the impact wasn't known. We didn't understand maybe as much as we do now about why sleep is so important. So helping the children understand this sleep cycle is actually a really powerful thing for them to see, and actually seeing that sleep isn't just we go unconscious, that we're going through these different stages. And so we can talk them through what's happening. Look at that first cycle. You go into kind of like this stage 1 sleep, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and then you come back up into that through all those stages and up into something called REM sleep, and then you go back down into those deeper sleep and back up into the REM sleep. So you go through these cycles, and each cycle takes about an hour and a half. And as you start the night, you get the deeper sleep on those cycles, but as you go through the night, you tend to get less of the deeper sleep, but more of the REM sleep. And for them to understand that is really helpful. And then for them to understand what's happening in each of those stages of sleep, and particularly the stage 4 deep REM sleep, where we know that we're getting a lot of growth and repair to all your muscles, and your cells and your organs in your body are all kind of they're getting that real replenishment and growth that's going to lead to them functioning really, really effectively. And you can talk to them maybe even about in that deep sleep that your brain is getting this cleanse. It's like a car wash where you get the fluid flushing out all of the toxins and all the damaged proteins and things. And so it's like this car wash every night for your brain, which is keeping it working really, really well. So they love that kind of thing where you're kind of saying this is why we need this, and then they understand that it's worth thinking about it a little bit more. And I think then talking about REM sleep and about how that helps you process emotions. So you dream a lot more in REM sleep, and your brain is kind of trying to make sense of everything that's been happening in your day, and to really help them understand that then makes you more emotionally resilient when you wake up, because you've kind of made sense of all those different conversations you were having, and all those thoughts and feelings that were going on, so that you wake up in a calmer place and a calmer state to approach the day. And you can, especially relevant in schools, you can talk about the fact that in the REM sleep, you're encoding the information you've learned during the day into that long-term memory as well. So it just makes your learning more effective. All that time and effort you put in during the day, it's going to be in there in that long-term memory if you get good sleep. If not, then you're probably not going to find it as easy to remember that stuff, and you might have to go over it again. So it's not as efficient way of learning. So I think this works really well. Again, when you're thinking about the teachers wanting to make sure that all the work they're doing with the kids is having good impact. For parents, they clearly want their children to remember stuff and do really well. And obviously the kids also are motivated. So I think giving them the reasons, the why, is really, really important. And I think this graph, or this kind of sleep architecture chart, is really helpful to help them understand that. And there's some information around kind of what is happening at those different stages of sleep as well. And then, just highlighting what do you feel like when you have a poor night's sleep? I think like one of the things you can do is just kind of ask the children questions sometimes. And, a good thing, depends on the size of the group that you're presenting to, but something called think, pair, share is really helpful. So you pose a question to them, and then you get them to kind of think on their own for 30 seconds or so. Then you get them to kind of pair up with the person next to them and discuss their ideas. And then you get them to share ideas with the class. And it just helps to build their confidence that, they've had a thought, they kind of feel more confident now. I've said it to my partner, and it seems to make sense. And now I'm ready to kind of share it with the rest of the class. So it's a nice way to kind of encourage participation. But you could say, like, how do you feel when you have a poor night's sleep? What problems do you think it might lead to in your day? And clearly, these are things that you can go through and actually, sort of talk about in, how that might play out in a day in the classroom. But these are obviously the short term um, things that we know that people struggle with if they don't have a good night's sleep. They feel less empathetic. They got low mood. They're likely to make poorer choices, especially around food as well and physical activity, as we mentioned before. But long term, they can also lead to increased in certain conditions as well. And again, some of that stuff for the children seems a long way off, and that maybe isn't as relevant to them, so they probably don't, sort of don't identify with that quite as much. But with the parents and the staff, again, that can be something that you could focus on a little bit more. And then the benefits of getting a good night's sleep, so they can really see that by having, the right amount of sleep every night for them, that leads to, much better functioning brain, much better functioning body, and that's going to put them in a great place to do whatever they want to do. So another question you can pose to them: how many hours do you get per night? And get them to kind of just maybe think that in their head or write that down somewhere. And then asking them how many hours do you think they actually need per night as well can be quite an interesting question for them, and sort of get them to work out the difference between what they actually get and what they think they need. And then showing them the stats that in their kind of age, we're looking at really going in with the year sort of sixes, which is like the 10, 11-year-olds. This would also be relevant for year sevens and eights, up to probably 12 or 13 years old as well, this particular presentation. But that they need, probably 9 to 11 hours of sleep per night is, sort of what the recommendations are, in order to really wake up feeling rested and feeling like they can function effectively, and all those processes we just talked about in that sleep architecture cycle, that those processes are kind of doing their job. And then you can say, well, look, this is what's happening to our sleep. We used to sleep 9 hours a night, and you can, again, think about what was life like in 1910. Was there actually any lights? Probably not. They had candles if they were lucky. There was certainly no TV, no smartphones, and the kids still find it's really hard to kind of compute what that would actually be like without any of these devices. And so because there was no stimulation, there was no light, actually, by the time it got to sort of 8 or 9 o'clock at night and it's dark, there's not much to do, then people would just go to sleep. I sometimes liken it to camping. Like if you go on a camping trip, what do you do when in the evening? People don't tend to look at their phones so much. There's obviously not as much light around, and you feel sleepy much earlier, and you're more likely to get into bed much earlier. By 1975, we obviously had lights and we had TVs, but those channels tended to finish at around about 9 or 10 o'clock, and then there wasn't a lot on for you to engage with. So again, we're getting a little bit less sleep, but we're still getting into bed, and kind of getting 7.5 hours sleep. And then by 2005, it's down to 6.8 hours per night. Obviously, if we did another sort of set of data from 2025, we were probably not going back up again. I would imagine that the data will be showing that we're getting less than 6.8 hours, because of obviously largely the amount of there's a busyness that we have in our lives, but also the fact that we've got all this entertainment and stimulation in the evenings. So another thing which is really important to try and help the kids understand is, and again, the staff and the parents, is that if you want 10 hours of sleep, you actually need to be in bed for 11 hours because of sleep efficiency and the fact that it takes a little bit of time for you to get to sleep. Probably during the night, you're going to wake up a little bit, even if you're not aware of it. So, if you have a sleep efficiency above 90%, you're doing pretty well. But that basically means you need an extra hour. So in bed to achieve that. So when I think when some of the parents see this kind of data and the numbers, again, they're a little bit like, you always get like a sharp intake of breath where they're kind of like, oh, is it really that much? Wow. So we're constantly underslept. I think a lot of us are walking around underslept and just used to that feeling. And so it's getting them to kind of think about doing an experiment on them. Let's have 2 or 3 days where we try and prioritize sleep, and we're all in bed by this time, and let's just see how we feel when we wake up, and let's see how we feel during the day, and kind of giving it a few days of actually trying it. I think can be a really effective way. We've got to be really careful not to preach about this information and blame people. And, I think it's really important to make it, clear that this is just something that our culture's evolved now into making this normal. And, there's all these challenges. So it's really hard, but something that we can do if we, decide consciously to make certain priorities. And it's convincing them that those priorities are in their interest. So I think it depends who you're talking to, but I think the same message is there, but it's just maybe in a slightly different way. If you're talking to the children, obviously what you're trying to do is help them to take ownership of their getting into bed and getting their sleep. What we don't want them is pushing back against their parents all the time when it's time to go to bed, and they, devices, gaming, TV, all these things make it hard, doesn't it, to kind of like, because I just watch one more episode, or I just, play one more game. And so they constantly kind of, I've got these very clever, very well-designed pieces of, things that are stimulating them, which makes it hard for them to switch off from. But it's helping them understand as much as possible that actually getting good sleep is in their interest. And it sounds like an uphill battle, but I've worked with like hundreds of children now who, when they fully understand what's going on and they understand how important things like sleep are and to how they feel, and they've done the experiment, then it becomes a much easier situation for them to manage. And I think also just remembering everyone's different. So find how much sleep is ideal for you. And that's the whole experimental piece again, like getting them to try different amounts of sleep and see what feels good. This is really useful to get them to reflect on. So do they fall asleep as soon as they get into bed, or within 30 minutes of getting into bed? Because that would be considered normal. Some children think they take ages to fall asleep, and they say, oh, it takes me 10 minutes to fall asleep. And it's like, it's pretty good. So giving them some information on this so they can actually understand, what is okay, what is normal, what to be expected. And then do they wake up during the night, getting them to think about that. If they're waking up more than kind of once or twice a night, then that could be something to think about. What's actually happening in their environment, that might affect that. And then if they do wake up, are they able to get straight back to sleep? And do they wake up in the morning feeling fully rested and energized? When I do my work with teenagers, that's an interesting question. I think I've only had one or two who've ever said yes to that question. So then some tips on how they can actually get good sleep. So one of the first things, and the children often don't realize this, is that if they can get out, outside as early as they can. So once they get up in the morning, getting outside, getting some natural sunlight, and helping them understand the idea of this circadian rhythm. And your body has this 24-hour body clock, and it needs to be reset every day. And the way you reset it is by getting natural light. And I like to think back to evolutionary biology a lot in the talks that I do, and help people compare how we're living now to, how we've evolved for the 200,000-300,000 years we've been, humans on the planet. And, actually when they sort of make that connection, they can see how what we're doing now is, a bit unusual, and therefore it motivates them again to kind of think, okay, well, I can get outside just 5 or 10 minutes in the morning. Maybe it's the walk to school. Maybe it's, that they can go and sit in their garden while they're, sort of eating their breakfast, or just having that time where they can get outside, and linking it into the kind of the melatonin levels as well. I think a lot of children are aware of melatonin. There's quite a lot of children who take melatonin because they do have difficulty with their sleeping, but they're using screens until 10 o'clock at night, and they're having dinner late, and they're doing all these. So it's, I think as much as possible bringing in some of these other pillars around sleep as well when we're talking to them, but giving them the idea of what's happening with melatonin. And actually, we can, during the day when we get outside, we reset our circadian rhythm, melatonin levels drop low. And then as we go through the day, they stay low until it starts to get dark, and then those melatonin levels build. And we can talk about blue light here can be quite effective. Also, physical activity. We know that will help you sleep better if you do some physical activity in the day. And one of the reasons, is because that once you've done that physical activity, you increase the production of GABA, which is something that makes you feel more relaxed, and it helps, promote good sleep. So again, helping the children, helping the parents and the staff understand the mechanisms why this actually is effective can be really, really helpful. Eating food, try to finish by 6 p.m. for the children. I probably extend that to 7 p.m. when I'm talking with the parents and the adults, but really we'd like them to be eating their family meal together. And it's that balance, isn't it, between, because for the children, they're probably going to be going to bed, especially if they're year 6, probably about 8 o'clock or 8, half 8 if they're getting a good night's sleep. So we want them to eat before 6 so that they're not eating, too close to that bedtime. So parents probably are going to go to bed a little bit later, so they can sort of push that back a little bit. But like I say, if they can engineer a way to be eating together by 6 p.m., that would be ideal. But again, giving them the science behind the fact that our body core temperature needs to drop by a couple of degrees in order to, get good sleep, and that if you're eating too close to bedtime and you've especially eaten a heavy meal, how that's going to mean that it's quite hard because of the metabolic rate's going to be up, and you're not going to find that core body temperature drops. Plus, you may end up with some sugar spikes, which again is going to make it, harder for you to get to sleep. So again, it just the base, you guys are, I'm sure, all aware of the science behind this, but it's just, presenting that to the people you're talking to in a clear way that really gets them to see the connection. And obviously reducing the snacking after dinner. And again, it's just another way to build in some of the other pillars. We're talking about sleep here, but we're building in, these other pillars into how that actually impacts on sleep. And then, like I say, with the blue light side of things, helping the children understand that when they're looking at screens, that will, and I often try and go into why blue light, and the fact that blue light is the same wavelength as you see when you're outside in the daytime. So it's confusing your brain and body, by looking at blue light, it still thinks it's daytime, so it doesn't need to increase melatonin levels. So therefore you're not feeling tired, you're not sort of building up that sleep pressure to get that, that good night's sleep. So even if you, do drop off to sleep, maybe it's not as good quality sleep if you're still looking at screens and stuff till late in the night. And a stimulating effect as well of playing the games or watching a Netflix, drama or social media content that they might be on. All of those things can have impact. And I know year 6s probably shouldn't be using social media, but they'll be playing games or maybe even messaging to friends and talking to friends and things. So I think there's a whole piece around smartphones and screen time, and we run some campaigns on that to help with getting the students actually presenting to the parents around sort of how they need support to be able to manage the screen time, because I think parents, the awareness is building, but there's still this real idea that they need to not miss out on having a smartphone because all their friends have got them, and therefore they're going to be ostracized. And so there's this sort of unfortunate situation where everyone's getting one because they don't want to be the one who's not left out, and that's not a great reason for getting these devices. And it means that the parents also don't, they don't fully understand what they can do on these devices and the impact of social media, and so they don't put in as strict regulations as they should, or boundaries, I should say, at home. And I think, again, touching on some of that in this talk could be useful, and it depends how long you've got to present for. Obviously, if you're talking to the kids, half an hour is going to be plenty. You probably don't want to go on for much longer than that because they're going to start to switch off. So you might not be able to include all of these slides, and you're going to choose your sort of emphasis. But if you're talking to parents, you might want to bring in this slide and actually start to sort of, explain to them there are lots of ways. If you do choose to get your children a smartphone, being really, sort of firm with certain boundaries. Don't let them take it into the bedroom. Make sure you've got parental control, making sure you're setting limits on, how long they can use certain apps for. After 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever feels appropriate for you, that they can't access, the phone at all. And there's so many simple things that you can do that can, sort of help the children because they can't manage it themselves. Their prefrontal cortexes aren't fully formed. We can't barely manage it ourselves when we're looking at using our phone, and I have to put limits on certain apps because I know if I start looking at it, I'll get drawn in, and so it's really important that we get parents to take responsibility if they're going to give the smartphone, help them understand how they can actually put these measures in place that will protect their children. And then it's about establishing these good evening routines. And we, again, liken it to the fact that, when you're young, you have a nice bath and you get dried by your mum and, read a bedtime story, and you're sort of tucked in bed, and, you're having that wind down period to sort of like get your body prepared for sleep. And our bodies are get very used to that kind of routine, and it knows what's coming next. It knows that if I do this and then do this and then I do this and then I go to sleep. And so building those kind of routines is really effective at getting people to get off to sleep. And so suggesting some different ideas, like not using screens after 7 because we know we don't want the blue light impacting us. Having low side lamps mimics kind of campfire as opposed to the overhead lights. Having a bath or a shower, especially if it's a hot bath or shower, can be really relaxing. Plus, it helps your body temperature then to drop when you do get into bed. Listening to music, journaling, we know can be really helpful at kind of just bringing that emotion down and kind of letting things that during the day that have maybe caused you to get a little bit of emotion build up, then these things can be dissipated quite well with those kind of techniques. And breath, using slow breathing through your nose, extending the exhale a little bit longer. Those little tips, helping them understand that is very calming for the body and helps to bring them into a much more restful state, can be really, really useful. And then thinking about the temperature of the room, not being too warm, keep it cool. I mean, 16 degrees, but like some people may have that kind of control in their houses, but just really just thinking about not being too warm. And then knowing that each night around 8 o'clock, my lights are going out. So the other thing which a lot of people do is they kind of get up early in the week, and then they tend to lie in a lot longer at the weekend, and helping them understand that that's actually making it really difficult for their bodies, because we have this 24-hour body clock, and if we get that out of sync at the weekend, then maybe you're getting up 2 or 3 hours later than you would do during the week. Actually, when it comes to Monday, your body doesn't want to go to bed at the same time. It's kind of harder to get to sleep on the Sunday, and then you're going to kind of have that short sleep on a Sunday into Monday, and that's going to lead to problems when you're then trying to focus and concentrate at school or at work on the Monday. So building that little bit of consistency and just sort of seeing if they can keep their get up time to within an hour and a half of what they would in the week at the weekend. And then I'd like to sort of finish with a case study. So this is any volunteers. So it might be that there's someone in the group that you always get characters who would like to kind of talk about, is there anyone find it difficult to get to sleep? Or is there anyone who's thinks they don't get enough sleep? And, actually getting them up and having a dialogue with them and kind of trying to hear their sort of situation, and then do a little bit of live coaching stroke problem solving with them to kind of help them, sort of maybe address why their sleep is not as it could good as it could be. That can be really, really powerful, and it's really engaging if there are children that are willing to do that. There may not be, and that's fine. And I think just being ready and prepared, just put it out there, maybe see what kind of response you get. Definitely don't force that. But if there are some kids that you often get that are kind of, super keen to come up and share things, as long as it's done in a really, careful manner, that you're being really considerate of the fact that's a public forum and you're not asking too personal questions. It's just some really basic stuff like what time do you go to bed, and what you're doing before you go to bed, and just some really simple stuff. It can be quite useful. But then there's this case study. So you might choose not to do that last bit. You might just go straight onto this and say, look at this boy. He's finding it really hard to fall asleep. I'm sorry, he is falling asleep in his lessons. He's really tired. He's not very got much motivation. He's like spending a lot of time gaming, often staying up way too late. So he's only getting 4 hours of sleep in a night, many nights of the week. And he drinks 24 bottles of Coke a week. And you can like present that to the kids and say, maybe again, like pair up or in little groups, like what do you think's happening here? Like, why do you think this boy is falling asleep in lessons? What can we do to help him? Again, it's so much fun when you get the kids to engage in this kind of stuff, and they come up with some amazing solutions and suggestions, and see things from such a different perspective to potentially what you're expecting sometimes. And it's brilliant. And it's, that's what they remember, and they'll kind of take that away with them. So it's those activities which are really engaging them, and are going to get them to sort of therefore act. And there's a kind of, this is how this played out. This is a real life scenario from a student I was working with. So this is kind of like what we then did with for him, and kind of, we brought him back into a place where he was addressing all of those issues in his lifestyle. So it came back to kind of him getting much, much better sleep, and therefore that sorted out a lot of his problems. And he was finding that he was able to improve his food, do some exercise, especially he really enjoyed his boxing. And it led to him doing really well in lessons. And the teachers noticed that, and obviously he got awarded Student of the Week. So that's kind of the presentation and some ideas. I would say you don't need to use all of those slides. I'm just going to stop sharing that for a second. And I am going to share. Which one is it? Okay. Let's close that. Can you see the BSLM website slide now? Is that the one?
Yep, I've got the website, yeah, the BSLM website, and then you've detailed the bullet points with the different resources on it.
So on the website, you saw that there was the other resources. The workbook kind of runs alongside the presentation in many ways, and can be used as something that they could do if you're in the class, but it could be used separately, or you again can modify that and sort of add your own questions or own activities in there. And the video I'd suggest you watch in your own time, which is a really nice case study again, which I mentioned at the beginning. But I guess just a real quick summary. I'm aware of the time here. We're kind of only got sort of 5 or 6 minutes, but I think just some key points when you're presenting. Just make sure you're clear at the beginning what you're going to cover, because I know all of you will have different experiences presenting in front of people, and that can be a bit daunting. But but sort of it's something that if you can stand up there and just feel really grounded and just try not to move around too much, kind of keep fairly still, and kind of speak with integrity. A lot of people plan what they're going to say. I think speaking naturally is one of the most effective ways to engage people. If people can tell if you're kind of not so not speaking so naturally and trying to remember stuff, I think just speaking from the heart feels like it's a really good way of engaging children. Thought-provoking activities can be really useful. Ask them sort of some questions about stats around, like you say, that how long does it take to run a mile type thing. All that kind of stuff really gets them engaged. They also get really engaged by the evolutionary biology aspect as well. They love sort of hearing about hunter-gatherers and kind of how we used to live and how things have changed. And not from like just a negative perspective. It's like, things have moved on and there's some great stuff, but actually what we're also finding that is that we've missed out. Now our biology isn't quite aligned in certain ways, and we need to try and help bring that alignment back in order to get ourselves, really functioning well. So we kind of thought-provoking, deliver the content, and then having that recap of summaries to take away. What can you go away and actually implement? So finishing your presentation with some action, some thoughts. What are the one or two things that you are going to do off the back of today? What are you going to try? What are you going to be curious about? What are you going to experiment on? And then we want to inspire curiosity. I think that is what lifestyle medicine is all about. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And the kids are naturally curious. They want to find out about this kind of stuff. They want to find out about their body, make it relevant to them. That's something else which, we find is they learn a lot at school. A lot of it, they don't see the relevance. So this is really relevant and making it, sort of really tie in with how they feel and, things that they want to be able to do. Storytelling is amazing. If you've got any personal, situations, things you can talk about, sleep, things that, you can bring in from your life or from people that you've been working with, and actually giving those real life examples, that is really engaging. Humor obviously works really well. Activities, so rather than just talking the whole time, I think having them engaged in doing stuff themselves. And again, depends if you're seeing a big group in an assembly hall or if you're seeing individual people in smaller groups in classes. Some ideas for activities. These all work really well. I think we sort of mentioned most of those things, but they love designing posters using different colors and creating their own things out of that. So it's all of these things. Include movement breaks as well. If you're talking for more than sort of 25 minutes, just something simple, get them up on their feet, just get them to, just play the kind of clapping game, so where you kind of have to kind of do that kind of thing. Just something that gets them to get the blood flowing and then kind of get them calm back down again. And if you're not super confident, do it on your own, pair up with someone else and kind of get in there. And, you could even split the groups into 2 or 3 and do like individual little workshops. And I'm going to talk to you about like sleep architecture and how much sleep you need. And over here, we're going to look at strategies for getting good evening routines. And, so it could actually be they move around on a kind of carousel, which can also be really effective. So yeah, sorry, I've gone on a little bit longer than anticipated there, but have we got any time for questions, or are we going to have to?
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Dan. That is just brilliant. I love that final bit as well about people pairing up and doing it in a bit of partnership in local areas and things as well. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So much information, great positive comments coming back. So thank you so much. I think there are just literally a couple of questions there. I don't know if you've got visibility around or not, but people saying are keen to connect with local schools. Yes, just a quick question. One of the questions was just about the REM sleep being restorative. But just want to clarify, you mentioned of REM sleep being restorative, but I think the infographics and the information is that non-REM deep sleep is the most restorative. So they were just sort of clarifying whether that was the correct information.
No, absolutely. I think the non-REM sleep was we talked about having the cells repairing and the body kind of growing and the REM sleep was more of the emotional processing and therefore being able to be in a better place emotionally to cope the next day, and the kind of encoding of long-term memory. So that's the way I tend to present it. I mean, if there's anything that's not quite right there, then please do let us know.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Excellent. We can have another look at that afterwards there. And then what do we have here? Do you see a place for breathwork training and mindful movement therapies in schools to help children understand they can change the way the heart works to change the way the heads work? Maybe demonstrate heart rate variability, biofeedback to show the science.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, and I tend to use that quite a bit with the groups and with the students that I'm working with, and I think setting them up for a good lesson. I've done a lot of it around exams as well, where we're using breath work and helping them to understand and notice how that makes them feel, and sort of how that also, the science behind the way in which it's giving more blood flow up to the prefrontal cortex. It's going to enable them to solve problems better, rather than being in that fear center. So I think all of that, absolutely. There's, and like the curriculums we're writing, it involves, bringing in that kind of breath work to their day and like implementing that at different points in their day to kind of help them regulate their emotions. Really, really powerful.
Yeah, lovely, excellent. Um, what's the other one? Would you include a mindfulness exercise? So that was maybe quite similar anyway, wasn't it, in terms of the breath works? But yes, a mindfulness exercise could be lovely, actually.
Absolutely. And again, I think it's sort of helping students understand what mindfulness is as well a little bit more, and kind of just bringing them into, sort of the difference between mindfulness and meditation, and, including things like the breath work, and all tying all that in for them and help. I think the big thing is our children have disconnected from themselves. They're disconnected from a lot of things, like nature and each other. And so I think all these tools are brilliant because it's just encouraging them to be curious about how they feel, what they're thinking. And we need that more, all these, and different things work for different people. So it's about just having this range of experiences which they go through, and hopefully some of the stuff really connects with them, and builds that connection back, and they start to pay attention to themselves, and we don't just rely on distracting ourselves all the time, because as we get older then we end up with bigger problems, because we don't know how to process our emotions, and we don't know how to recognize what's going on within our bodies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to tie that up in just a second. Just very quickly, there's the purpose of us having this sort of chat just now and for you talking through the materials beautifully as you have done, was because sort of June was sort of flagged by yourself, I think, and the rest of the SIG as well, as being a good time to be able to go into schools, things calming down a little bit towards the end of term and maybe a little bit more space in the curriculum. But for those who maybe can't manage June, I mean, presumably going in at the start of the new year, sort of September, October time, that's obviously fine, I imagine, as well. It doesn't just have to be specifically June.
Yeah, I think we targeted this time, like you say, because the year six is often all the SATs are done. Teachers actually in schools are looking for some fun activities, something different to bring in. It's also transitioned for children from year six up to year seven in England again, which that's a big step. And finding that when they get to year seven, there's a lot of other distractions. Certain things become, a lot of parents get their children phones, or they get a bit more freedom, and so actually establishing some really good awareness around sleep, especially, is this is a perfect sort of time for it. So yeah, we'd love for as many of you to get in and try the resource and give us some feedback, and kind of we can welcome that, and add it so that the resource kind of evolves each year, and it gets hopefully better and better and more effective. But it'd be fantastic to the schools need this kind of support. I'm working in them all the time, and they are crying out for it. So if you're able to spare the time, if you've got children at school, your own children, and that's sometimes a really good way in. But any school that you're local to, If you can reach out to them and find a way to come in and do a presentation, it would be super beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And feeding back any, I guess, any feedback from any presentations taking place as well. It would just be great to know how everybody's getting on with using the resource and being able to move forward accordingly. And obviously, just keeping everything as up to date with latest evidence, I guess, as that maybe comes in and tweaks being made to the presentation accordingly as well. But look, I'm conscious of the time. Dan, thank you so much again. We will get this recording put up on the website so people can refer back to it at any time they want to go and present. And any questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch by contacting BSLM office email on the website. And then I can refer anything on to yourself, Dan, I'm sure, if there's any queries specific to the special interest group. But
Sure.
once again, thank you so much for your time, and thank you all so much for joining today.